Teamwork is the secret that makes common people achieve uncommon results. That's a quote by Oni Wilhock. The famous industrialist Andrew Carnegie said something similar. Uncommon results, uncommon achievement. That's what organizations and corporations want today. So how can you get it? One way you can get it is by using self-managed teams. What is a self-managed team? It's a team that manages itself. Companies like General Electric, Corning, and Procter & Gamble are using these types of teams more and more these days. Back in the 1980s, this was not nearly as commonplace. It's kind of unusual, but there was a manufacturing facility in Virginia that was run completely through self-managed teams. And I'm going to talk about this example and share that with you today. But before I do that, I want to talk about 3 key concepts that help them on their self-managed team be able to actually do that. This is supported through scientific research. And I'm going to talk about a couple studies that were done. The 3 key concepts that matter in this work are cohesion, cooperation, and team self-confidence. When you work in a team, remember to use these 3 concepts and you'll have a high-performing team. Now let me just ask you, how many of you think that helping behavior is something you would want on a team in teamwork? Raise your hands. Yeah. Yes, you're right. Absolutely. So how can you get helping behavior? How can you get people to help each other? There was a study done that involved 133 Taiwanese project teams. These were teams in the electronic product manufacturing area. They looked at team cohesion and team cooperation. They wanted to know, would these help people have more helping behavior? And one thing to be aware of is that helping behavior is a voluntary component of teamwork. You just can't force people to do that. And when they set up this study, they thought, well, what's going to probably work best for us is to get teams together so that the people on the team are similar, have things in common. But they were really surprised when they did this study, because what it showed was that some diversity actually helped the teams perform better, particularly when there was a member on that team that was more extroverted or a member on that team that was older. That team performed better because those people put out a little extra effort to help the other team members. There was another study that was done. This also involved Taiwanese firms. This was 130 project teams. These were teams that worked for professional high-tech type of companies. They looked here to see, does team cooperation and team self-confidence contribute to performance? The answer was yes. They found a definite link between those. The teams that had more self-confidence performed better. Why would you want a team to have team self-confidence? Why does it matter? It matters because when you have a team like that, they'll put out more effort. They'll take on more difficult projects. They'll persist when they run into a problem and keep going until they get to the answer. And if they have a conflict among themselves, they're a lot more likely to solve it. So these are the things that make a difference when you have a team. The main thing that I learned from this research, to get it down to something you could apply, is that when you're a team, if you in order to make that team have more team self-confidence, what you need to do as a team member is to interrupt any negative emotional states and prolong any positive emotional states. As I'm going through this example today, I'd like for you to see if you can identify when there's a positive emotional state that's happening or when there's a negative emotional state that's happening. Just see if you can notice this. This example is based on a real-life production facility that was operated completely through self-managed teams. It's based on that. It happened, the company I'm talking about is the James River Corporation, the Kendallville plant, and this happened in 1987 when it was a startup. The way this story starts is that there's two new people joining the company, Billy and Susan. They have been told that they're going to have 8 weeks of orientation and training. Wow, 8 weeks? The first 2 weeks will be social training, and the second part of it will be technical training. Billy was shocked. He had worked at automotive plants. He'd never had to go through something like that before they even start working. But that's what this situation involved. This is what happened on the first day that they brought all the new recruits together. They handed out keys to everybody. Billy and Susan were talking and discussing this and saying, "What's this key for? Is it for a special locker? Is it to the break room or to the bathroom? What's this for?" Discover, this was the key to the whole plant. Symbolically and actually, every single worker was responsible for how well the plant did as a whole. This was different. They were kind of astonished by this. Billy and Susan were joined. This was a new plant, but anyway, they had a situation where there was a team that already had 2 people missing. The self-managed teams are not something that everyone can really adapt to. So they're joining a team that already exists, that has Karen, Clyde, and John already on it. So Billy and Susan, the new people joining this new team. When they first got together on this new team, the first thing they did is work on their team guidelines. What are guidelines? They're the rules that govern how that team will work together. Things like, if I'm going to be late, I'll call and let you guys know, the other team members. This is a way of starting out, building cohesion into their teamwork from the very beginning. This next incident is going to tell you about a challenge they faced in terms of cooperation. What happened was that Billy and Susan were new. And there was a bad feeling on the team. It was only after about a month or so. And that just did not feel very good. It almost felt like there was 2 teams, the 2 new people and the 3 old people. And one day Billy went to Susan and he said, "I'm sick and tired of Clyde telling me what to do all the time and bossing me around. I'm going to go confront him and set him straight." Susan heard this and she said, "Wait a minute, if you do that, that's just going to put Clyde on the defensive. It's going to make our teamwork worse, not better." What you might want to consider doing, this is Susan talking to Billy, is this was on a Friday, and she said to him, what you might want to do is, over the weekend, the 2 days, mull over what you're going to say to Clyde and how you're going to say it. Billy started thinking about this, and his next thought was, I really don't even want to do this. So he asked Susan, "Will you talk to Clyde for me?" She said, "No, I won't. But what I will do is I will open the discussion on Monday and I will support you. So Monday rolled around, they're in their team meeting, and she says, Susan says, Billy and I do not feel like full team members yet. Then Clyde jumped in right away and he said, well, everything would be okay if everyone would just take orders from me and follow my direction. And then Susan immediately interrupted and said, no, it would not, because if we do that, we will not be learning to think for ourselves. Karen and John are listening to this. Suddenly they realized that they had been kind of lax and lame, just sort of standing back and letting Clyde, since he was the most experienced and the most competent at the plant, they just let him fix the problems. Finally, the team discussed this and they decided what we'll do is the next time there's a problem, we'll meet at the end of the press and discuss it before we actually start fixing the problem. And Billy said, Clyde, why don't you lead the discussion since you're the most knowledgeable and the most competent? The point here is that they had to work at cooperation. It did not really happen just automatically. This next incident is about another type of challenge that came up for the team. This was a challenge of cohesion. Were they going to be able to stick together as a team? What happened was that Karen started missing. She would miss work, she would be late, she would sometimes not even call in. I should tell you, this was a newly formed team. For that reason, the others on the team did not really feel like they should say anything. They were reluctant to say anything to Karen. Finally, one day, she wasn't paying attention to what she was doing. She got her hand caught in the machine. Ooh, the ambulance comes over and picks her up and pushes her away. 2 days went by. Then she called and asked to meet with the team. When she met with them, she said, I have a drug and alcohol problem. While I'm waiting the 6 weeks for my hand to heal, I'm going to go into a rehab facility. When I get done with that, I want to know if I can come back to the team. Well, they had to stop and think about that because this meant they were going to be shorthanded. They decided that they would take her back. It was a lot harder than they thought it would be. They tried to get other people at the plant to come over and lend a hand. They kept getting excuses, things like, well, I've got to go to a meeting, or I'm too busy, or our team has to solve our own problem. They just, it was definitely a problem for the team. They finally decided what they would do is just shut the press down during lunch hour. Then what happened was they'd be scrambling around at the end of the day. A lot of times they would leave the machine all messy and leave it without the supplies. They didn't replenish the supplies. So then what happened was the team coming in after them on the next shift was upset. And one day Bob came over and he said, what is this? You guys are just leaving the machine all messy and everything, and this is detrimental. We can't get our work done because of this. So he sort of attacked Susan and the team. I'm calling it the home team. Then Susan pointed this out. She stood up to Bob and she said, don't attack us, we need help. And he stepped back a little bit and thought about this, and he realized he really did want to cooperate with them. Then at that point, John, another member of the home team, spoke up and he said, what I can do is create a checklist so that you can go through and identify what needs to be done, and it'll make it easier for us to get it ready for you guys. And he said, also what I'll do is stay over a couple hours and work directly with Bob so that everything gets done. in the end, but what happened was that a link was formed between these two teams, a cohesive link and greater cooperation. This was really a good thing. The next incident that I'm going to talk about had to do with a challenge in terms of team self-confidence. How do you have team self-confidence? You have to have every single member of that team to have a certain level of self-confidence, as well as you have to have confidence in your team as a whole. Billy, when he first joined the company, definitely did not have very much confidence in terms of communication skill, but Susan helped him. Similarly, Susan, although she had a lot of mechanical aptitudes, didn't actually have the skill, so Billy encouraged her to go ahead and take on those challenging tasks. At this point in time, everyone on the team has a lot of self-confidence. The whole team is very confident. This is important for the challenge that came up next. Because what happened was the next thing that was a big challenge affected the entire plant. The problem was that sometimes the press machine would be idle for 6 hours, a long time. So they had to speed this up. What the plant decided what we'll do is we'll form a special changeover task team to work on this and address this. Billy was selected to serve on that team, and then they had some other people from other work teams at the plant that got together to look at this problem and see what they could do. Billy had an idea. He said, well, perhaps what we can do is videotape the changeover process. And not only that, but he volunteered to have his team, the home team, videotaped. They were going to be the guinea pigs for this new idea. Wow. That definitely demonstrates a lot of team self-confidence, because you wouldn't want to show off your team if they were really bad. What this ended up showing, they made a lot of improvements based on this, but I'll just go over a couple. They shared this new approach, these improvements, with all the teams at the plant. And guess what their reaction was? They shared this new approach, these improvements, with all the teams at the plant. And guess what their reaction was? They shared this new approach, these improvements, with all the teams at the plant. And guess what their reaction was? They shared this new approach, these improvements, with all the teams at the plant. And guess what their reaction was? They shared this new approach, these improvements, with all the teams at the plant. And guess what their reaction was? They shared this new approach, these improvements, with all the teams at the plant. And guess what their reaction was? They shared this new approach, these improvements, with all the teams at the plant. And guess what their reaction was? Resistance, reluctance. They did not want to use these new improvements. Why? Because they just did not feel ownership of these new ideas. So Billy volunteered to go and work with them individually and help them so that they could see these improvements in action. What happened was that within 2 weeks, every single work team at the plant had improved their changeover process and made it faster. Research shows statistical validity for 3 key concepts: cohesion, cooperation, and team self-confidence. My factory example that I talked about today, Susan was able to interrupt the negative emotional state that was developing when Billy was talking about confronting Clyde about being bossy. And then she interrupted Clyde when he was talking about that everyone should follow his directions. Instead, she was able to flip and get him to actually help the team. be cooperative instead. Then Billy was able to have a positive, prolong a positive emotional state by getting the changeover task team to implement the improvements that showed up in the videotape. And not only that, but he was able to then get the entire plant to adopt these improvements. That was a further advancement of this positive emotional energy and a positive emotional state. These three concepts, cohesion, team coordination, cooperation, and team self-confidence, will help you to have a high-performing team.